Call the meeting to order and pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the agenda is before us. Is there any additions we have to make or?
Yes, I have four additions. Good part is 3 can go under consent. The 3 for consent is pay application number 7 for the 2018-2019 infrastructure project. That is in the pile of additions. That's for $29,889.67. Maybe 10A. And then we have the annual agreement with Minnesota Department of Revenue, I think it is, for the energy assistance program we administer through our electric and natural gas utilities. Nothing's really changed in that. It's just the annual updated agreement term. We do this every year, so that can go under 10B. And then 10C, Bolton and Mink invoice for the 2018-19 infrastructure project in the amount of $15,963, and that invoice is in the additional materials in the packet. And then the final one under new business would be relating to the Hauser building. Aaron Walton put together an order to repair or raise the Hauser building that would be sent off to E&I Global Investments. That's included in your packet with photos, and when we get that, we'll go over that a bit more as well. So that'd be 12A.
Okay, so we've got a 10A partial payment estimate number 7.
Yep.
10B energy assistance
Program agreement.
10C is Bolton make payment. 12A Hauser building. And is that it? Does anybody else have any matters we need to consider besides these? Not, I need approval for agenda.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Not all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimously carries, no public hearing. Approval for the consent agenda, items 5 through 10C. Any discussion on those items? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, you look for a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Also moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda items 10 or 5 through 10C. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion unanimously carries. Number 11, presentation of the audit.
Extra materials.
Yeah, there's like 100 pages there for you guys to read.
Can't let you home in my place.
Bedtime reading. Well, the good news is I'm not going to actually read page for page detail on that. You know?
Just every other page.
Nick would.
You also have a copy of the financial statements, and there's really just a couple of pages that I want to go over on that. Kind of just gives you an idea of what happened during the year. I mainly like to look at the statement of revenues and expenditures. Page number 8 for the general fund and all governmental funds, actually. Yep. So this one's got the draft copy of the financial statement.
So the packet we're going to be in is the one that's in front. It says draft. It'd be in the extra materials.
We'll do that one first, and then I'll just briefly go over the drafts.
That's a big one.
Pretty standard.
The main thing on here is what I like to point out is go down to about the third to the bottom of the line. It says net change in fund balance.
Which page is this again?
Page number 8. Look at the net change in fund balance. That tells you whether or not you increase resources or you decrease. So general fund, you had ended the year with a $22,000 negative, which basically means you spent more than you brought in, which overall though, that's still pretty good. You know, that's not a severe amount of deficit spending. The capital projects fund, if you look at that, net change in fund balance, $633,000. That is actually just represents unspent bond proceeds. Your project had not completed in 2018, and so you ended the year with $633,000 left to complete that project. So, and then the EDA fund, negative $25,814 change in fund balance. So again, that's not very significant either, and you know, you kind of expect some of that to go down anyway, because the timing of when you issue new loans and things like that impacts that. So overall, you know, nothing dramatic on your governmental funds. Have you turn to page number 11, which is the operating statement for all your proprietary funds. And if you look down to the line that says operating income or loss, as you go across that line, you can see for the most part, every single fund had an increase, which means the revenue exceeded all your operating expenditures, except for the liquor fund, which had a negative $29,000 loss. So, you know, other than the liquor store fund, all the other funds, you know, actually had very good years. You know, they're generating enough income to help pay the debt. Some of the funds are generating excess to help you in your general fund, because you had like $350,000 in operating transfers, and so those funds are looking very good. Any comments or questions on that?
If I recall correctly, I think it was the 2018 budget had that $22,000 decrease. I believe that was actually planned for in the budget for 2018 was an operating deficit that year.
Right, right. Otherwise, the other handout that I have is just called Financial Trends. I like to do this one just to kind of give you a snapshot from the last 4 years what's happening with your funds, because that kind of gives you an idea of whether or not you're going forward or backwards, should we say. And if we look at page number 1, this again is just a general fund. You know, your revenues are always less than your expenditures because you do heavily rely on your other funds to transfer every year to help pay for some of the expenses. So that's why you have, you basically are showing like a loss as far as typical operations, but it's all covered by your other funds. Cash and investment balance at the end of the year, if you look at $591,000, you know, in order to gauge that, you kind of think about, well, how long would it take you to spend that? And, you know, that's probably worth about 5 months worth of expenditures. So, you know, there's really no excess in that fund. You know, that's probably about where you need to be because, you know, your property taxes, the state money doesn't come in until May and June. And so you always want to make sure you have enough cash on hand to cover the expenses for at least the first 5 months of every year. So, pretty much I'm saying you're at a bare minimum on that, you know, but it's not terrible. And then I'll have you turn to page number 3. The water fund, as you can see there, you know, the green bar represents the cash and investments balance. You're maintaining pretty well on that. Every year you're generating positive net income, so that, you know, that fund looks very good too. And if you want to gauge how well your cash and investments are, if you look again, how long would it take you to spend that? Well, obviously you have more than 2 years worth of typical expenses in that fund. So, and for the most part, all your funds are in that position. You know, you've accumulated a good amount of resources where you're not in a position that if something major comes up and needs repair, you've got the funds available. And so, pretty good track record on all those. And then I'll just have you skip to the last page, page number 9. As you can see, the cash and investment balance the last 4 years, you know, you're pretty much maintaining around $6 million. 2018, you actually had a little more, but that was just because of the bond proceeds that weren't spent yet. So you had an extra $600,000 in that. So overall, I think if you look at the overall health of the city and the resources that you have on hand, I'd say you're in pretty good shape. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, the only other thing I'd like to talk about is just when we look at the audit, we look at your internal controls, and we usually issue findings if we think there's something that needs to be corrected. So we had one finding that was considered a material weakness, and that's when we classify it as material weakness, that's something we'd like you to take action and correct. And the only thing we had on that was we had a significant number of adjustments that we had to make for the financial statements. And some of that had to do with, there's a lot of changeover as far as the investments moving around and things like that. But a few of the accounts weren't reconciled completely like we would typically expect. But it's nothing that I'm pretty confident Nicholas and I can work together and basically just kind of implement something to resolve some of those issues. You know, we typically do help with some adjustments, but there's certain adjustments, you know, we don't expect that we would have to make. So I think overall, the way things are set up in terms of the way, like separation of duties is usually an issue, but I don't think it is because of how you have it separated between Nicholas and Chris is pretty good. So for a small city, I think those are very good. But so it's just, to me, it's basically just a tweak on what you're doing, and basically could be easily remedied, I believe.
2018 was a big transition. I started in late 17, and then a lot of transition in investment and payroll stuff and other things, and the debt service stuff, getting that all taken care of. A lot of transition in that, so definitely going to work with him to make sure that doesn't reappear.
And anytime you have a change in terms of administrators, I mean, it's like day and night difference between how people operate. And so some of those things just need to be ironed out a little different. So. Any questions at all? Otherwise, the third handout, I'll just let you read on your own. It's basically just a standard letter that we're required to issue. There's nothing that's really major in there that I want to point out. I think basically, I think things are pretty well set up. Like I said, I think you're doing a good job. I think little tweaks here and there should do it. So.
Any questions?
All right, well, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we need to approve the audit. So we need a motion to approve the audit present for us information.
I'll make the motion.
Then moved and seconded to approve the 2018 audit by
It was Westburn action.
So any discussion on it? Any other discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion unanimously carries. 12, approval of Lois Gillis, the ADA. I think there's a vacancy for Mike Kicker.
Correct. Yep.
So-
Mike Kicker resigned from the board, and the EDA talked about it. They had a couple candidates. One didn't want to, said they didn't want to. Lois Gillis was the other candidate. She said she would.
She's been on there before. So,
I'll make a motion to put her on.
I'll second it.
been moved and seconded to approve the appointment of Lois Gillis to the ADA vacancy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Unanimously carries. 12A. It's a little bit different. Weyerhaeuser Building. There's a packet in here. It says the Fairfax City Council in matter of 101 Park Street South. Nick, you kind of want to take us through. I kind of read it.
I'll certainly introduce it. Stemming from a lot of the dilapidation that has happened to the Hauser building over the last year and a half, things that have been happening, we were directed to go ahead and move on remedy for these dilapidations, which has come to what we have in front of us. This is an order that was put together by Aaron Walton to E&I Global Investments, the owner of the property, to make repairs or raise the building and remove it entirely. So on the first page, we have the findings of fact. Number one being that E&I Global Investments is the owner of the company and where they are out of. Number two, the owner of record and the property description. 3, that the city's utilities were disconnected on about September 8th, 2015. Number 4, the subject property was a retail building with apartments on the second floor and has not been occupied since approximately 2010 in December. and is completely abandoned. Number 5, on or about April 6th of 2018, then again around April 5th, 2019, Bernie Wenner, our building official, observed the building and did some inspections of it, which we had reports about and their exhibits. Number 6, from the site visits, Mr. Wenner prepared a written assessment of the property. One of his primary concerns are as follows. Number A, the collapsed parapet wall on the north side of the building. The wall is lying on the inside of the roof and causes additional weight, which will become greater once there is snow cover. In addition, the exposed top of the parapet wall allows water to penetrate inside, which causes freezing and expansion, causing the entire face to collapse. B, there are missing windows and broken glass, which is a danger to the public, particularly plate glass storefront windows, which we have boarded up. Letter C, there is no heating system. Letter D, there is no plumbing throughout the building. Letter E, there is inadequate electrical and illegal wiring. F, the front of the building is separating at the top from the perpendicular walls in front. G, there is little to no insulation throughout the building. H, in Mr. Wenner's opinion, the building meets the definition of hazardous under Minnesota State statute. Number 7, a copy of the assessment letter dated July 2nd, 2019 is attached as Exhibit B. He had noted that no repairs have been made since he first viewed the building and continues to deteriorate and be a danger to the public. 8, in addition, according to Mr. Wenner, a dwelling is considered uninhabitable under Minnesota State Building Code if it is without potable water, sewer, and electricity. Therefore, the subject property has been uninhabitable since 2015. Number 9, after a review of the entire file, the council hereby adopts Wenner's findings as its own. 10, the city council finds that the subject property is vacant and unoccupied and is deemed hazardous due to the fact that the building is open to trespass and has not been secured in the building, and it continues to deteriorate. 11, the city council finds that the subject property is a hazardous building or a hazardous property with the meaning of Minnesota State Statute, Section 463.15, because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, physical damage, unsanitary condition, and it constitutes a fire hazard or hazard to public safety and health. Based on the findings of fact, and this work comes to the order, the City Council for the City of Fairfax has determined that the house on the subject property is unsecured and hazardous, and pursuant to Minnesota State statutes as listed, hereby issues the following. Within 53 days of the date of this order, E&I Global Investments shall repair and correct the hazardous conditions of the building as described below, or raise and remove the building. Letter A, repair the collapsed parapet wall on the north side of the building, remove the debris from the collapsed wall. In addition, seal the exposed top of parapet wall to prevent water from penetrating inside. B, replace windows where missing windows and broken glass. C, install a heating system in the building. D, repair the plumbing throughout the building. E, repair electrical and correct illegal wiring. F, repair the front of the building where separating at the top from perpendicular walls in front. G, install proper insulation throughout the building. Number 2, a reasonable extension of time may be considered by the City Council if the owner can demonstrate reasonable progress on the above list and good cause for the extension. Number 3, this order shall be served upon owner and upon all lien holders of record in the manner provided for service of a summons in a civil action. 4, the city attorney is authorized to make a motion for summary enforcement of this order in the District Court of Renville County unless corrective action is taken or unless an answer is filed within the time specified in Minnesota State statutes. Number 5, the city shall assess any costs that it incurs enforcing this order as an assessment against the property according to law. And there we have the attachments in the back of the letters by Bernie Wenner. Photos which were taken by Mr. Wenner with the assistance of our public works crews. Was there anything you would like to add to that?
So just to be clear about what we're doing, so the city has authority under Minnesota statutes, chapter 463, to make this, to take this action. So the document that we went through, so that it's the findings in order that we are proposing for the council to adopt. So this is what we're suggesting, because this will become like a civil complaint, so that once it gets served on the owner, and assuming they don't comply with it, we're gonna have to file it with the court to get a motion to go ahead and raise the building. So we wanna make detailed findings on exactly what they were supposed to do to fix it. Because once we get that order from the court to enforce it, we can go in there with the wrecking ball. And so I just want to be clear up front, the city's going to have to incur the cost of doing this, and probably it's going to be a loss, because we can assess it against the property, but nobody's going to pay the taxes, right? So I just want to be clear about that up front. And I'm assuming this guy's not going to respond if there's been nobody over there and nobody taking responsibility for it, and it's just a liability. But that's sometimes the cost of keeping the city safe and correcting these conditions. So I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with this, because we'll need a motion approving the findings in order, and we'll go forward with it. The timeline listed in here, it had 53 days, because Bernie had said give it 2 months, and by the time we get to the meeting, a week's gone by already now. So that's probably a fair amount of time. If he's going to start working on it, he would have to get on it, but we're not expecting he will, and hopefully we can remedy this before the snow flies. And so it's possible, but by the time we get it filed with the court, served out, the time goes by, get it filed with the court, get a court date, it's going to be into the fall anyway. So Bernie sent me another set of photos that I wanted to pass around. I wanted to attach them because he had taken some of them probably in April. So take a look at them. I would include them as part of his report. He's got his comments on there for what you're looking at. We'll end up having to pay the court filing fee and motion fee to get in and get this taken care of. But the order does spell out the process there that Nicholas went through. So does anyone have any questions on any of that?
So the taxes are not being paid.
Correct. They're about 4 years in arrears.
Or, we're gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, something has to be done.
Is there any place we can get help with this? This is gonna be a big bill. No, nothing?
There's really not.
No, this isn't a unique problem. I've had to go through the process for several houses. I think we did one in the north side of town here
They made a
a
grant.
couple years ago.
I think they made a grant.
I mean, some federal.
Olivia's got the same problem with, they've got a big old, can't remember what they call it, the Olivia Apartments. It's a big concrete.
Oh, on the north side of town there?
Yeah, it's near the Senex, where 71 comes from the south, and that's gonna be a really expensive.
What are we talking? How much? 50, 75?
Well, I think for a house, it was into the mid-20s.
Is it really?
Yeah, so for something like this,
We're probably talking.
I hate.
100?
No, I'd say 50-ish for demolition.
I have no idea.
I'll start working on cost estimates.
Sometimes it's.
You could probably actually call Hoffman because they did that estimate for E9. Remember that was like about a year ago,
Yep.
give or take, that they had that already for a cost for demolition. Because they were here and went and walked through it and everything, so.
And we'll go out for quotes for it, of course.
Right.
Where's the asbestos situation sitting there? I'm sure
There's-
before they do anything, I think you have to get an approval that it's asbestos free.
Right.
Because they aren't gonna demolish it until that's approved.
There will be an asbestos cost. The first floor tiles are asbestos, but all the piping has been.
Right, 90% of it's already taken out. so.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
All the
'Cause
piping
more-
is gone.
Okay.
And we don't know who removed that, but it's gone now.
somebody made a chunk of change.
So the first floor does have asbestos floor tiles in it, and I'll have to get a cost estimate
that's
for
minimal.
remediation. So if we're talking 50 for demolition and another 15, I like to overshoot my numbers. Talking 75, all said and done.
I'm sure. You like Phil, I mean, get Phil too, you don't get in there.
Yeah, and that demolition
That
cost.
usually always includes it.
Yeah, demolition cost would include site fill and prep on that.
How much you can do, and it's a hazard, because it's gonna go,
Right.
it's gonna go.
And you
This is the one I know,
Yeah.
found the goal.
Yeah.
And it, car drive by or some kid, it's not
No,
gonna
you're
be.
right.
Being
Could
right
be
on the
worse if
corner.
we don't do anything about it.
It's not gonna be, it's not gonna be pretty.
That front wall could fall off, that's what he
Yeah,
said.
someone got hit, you know.
Yeah. So I think a park or a parking lot?
You know, something
Half
has to
and
go there. You're gonna have a 12-foot snowdrift coming across Park Street.
Central
Yeah.
Park number 2.
No offense.
You're gonna need more than a snow fence. It's gonna be a huge drift.
And that'll be-
across Park Street.
Think worked in, I would imagine if you call up often, so we work it in our budget by August, kind of get an idea what we're looking at maybe
Yep, we'll get cost estimates together for review.
for, all right,
I guess that's what we're coming back to. It's really nice to have those really healthy fund balances.
Yep.
We get them over situations like this.
all right, so we need a motion to approve, the, findings and facts and the submission of an order.
I so moved.
I'll second. Or-
Been moved and seconded that, we send the information, finding the facts, and with the submission of the order that's written in this, report for 101 South Park Street. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
You wanna send me up a signed copy and we'll get it served on
How many copies do you want?
that one.
Staff reports.
Take that, pass it down. So for my report, as you saw in the paper today, they jumped the gun on us and took some pictures of the bathhouse, but it's looking really nice down there. She put on the finishing touches, so if you get a chance to swing down to the pool and see the bathhouse, recommend it. Looks very, very nice. That was a really good job she did. So that should be all complete. We'll get the invoice for that and probably see it on next month's bills, I would assume. The 2018 infrastructure project, contractors M&R did come back and correct a lot of the, well, they corrected the boulevard work, brought in screened dirt, flattened it, reseeded it, and things were going really well. Then we got 4.5 inches of rain that washed a bunch of it off, but they'll be back in the fall to seed once again. They have to establish the grass. They don't just get to seed and say, thanks, see you later. So they'll be back to reseed in the fall, but the boulevards are looking a lot better now. Spoke with a lot of the homeowners that had complaints initially, and they're all satisfied with the work that's been done. We got the bids were received by the city of Olivia for our seal coating project that we're jointly working on. The engineer's estimate for the total project was $174,729. The low bid came in at $169,009. So Fairfax's original cost estimate for this was $48,263, and it included 5% contingency. The updated cost with the bids in is now $46,603.20, so a reduction of a little over $1,600 from original estimate, which is always a good thing. Park Street South, stripers came in and they've done that. We got a lot of feedback last year that they wanted, residents and businesses wanted to see the angles a bit sharper, more in than it was in the past. And traditionally, they're 60-degree angle parking stall. That was reduced to 50-degree parking stall. So the ends of vehicles won't stick out as much into the driving lanes as they did prior. So hopefully that'll help with that. Days of Thunder weekend seemed to go really well. A lot of people attended the garage sale. A lot of people were saying that they had more people attend the garage sales, The weather held out exactly as it needed to. Seemed to be a lot of people in town. I had one stand that was serving, I think it was pork sandwiches, were saying they did about 700 this year, which was more than previous years. So, and then the mini rods event seemed to go over really well. What do you think, John?
Good, yeah. Except for that one.
The one that I was laying in your house?
Scary.
That one went almost off, but didn't quite.
Those guys really move fast.
Yeah, they peeled some rubber down on that street. They did a little free
Oh,
seal
it
coating
went out
for
of
us.
control.
Clean their pants?
Holy crap.
But it seemed to go really well. Still working on the community center rental policy. Hopefully we'll have something together for consideration at the next council meeting. We're still working on the old project, the depot lease transfer. This was something from last year. Right now, the Depot Association is the one who holds the lease, and the lease is from the Rail Authority. And we were looking at getting that, and it's a 99-year lease with 80-something years left. We're looking to get that transferred over into the city's name, so if the city is the leaseholder, we can insure everything in there. We can do maintenance repairs to it. The Depot Association just doesn't have the cash flow, and their membership isn't quite as youthful as they once were. So bringing that under the city's authority will make it easier to do the kind of work we need to do. They'll still run it, they'll still open it, they'll do all the things they used to do. It'll just allow us to insure it, take some of that cost burden off the Depot Association, and then do repairs on it. That's sitting over with MnDOT right now, has been for the last 4 or 5 months. They were one of the signatories on the original lease, so they need to sign off on it. In true state agency fashion, it's taking quite a bit of time. I had reached out to them last month to see where they were at with things. Haven't heard back, so well, once a month I bug them, see where they're at with things. Still plotting on that. Again, it said the Baseball Association said they donate $20,000 towards the Memorial Park ball field improvements. And I'll have more information on that at the next meeting. And then passed out to the area is the National Night Out flyer that's coming up. That went in the utility bills today, and those will be going out at Stuffers. So that's what I have for my report. All right, so I'll go into the financials. For June 2019, for the general fund on the expense side of things, this month we paid property and casualty insurance came out this month, so we saw a lot of that in there, and debt service payments also came out as well. Other than that, it's pretty normal. On the general fund revenues end of things, the ambulance revenues are still coming in slightly above target. The community standard revenue is now at 106.8% of budgeted totals, which means at this point we've made as much money as we budgeted to make off of it, so we'll just continue, and that could be a line item we adjust. Well, it was adjusted in the budget for next year. This month, though, we also received the first half of our tax settlement as well as a partial of the first half of the LGA payment. So we'll get more of that. LGA is more in July, but we got a first half tax settlement. And then we'll see second half settlements in usually November, December timeframe in there. On the water fund end of things, again, you'll see property casualty insurance on a lot of these, debt service payments on a lot of these. It's that time of year where those get made. We did have a well pump that was replaced along with some of the sleeving on the wells. That came out last month. That was a little over $10,000. The pump simply failed on us, and we had to get it replaced. These things just happen on us, so that was a little over $10,000 expenditure that we had to move forward with. On the revenue side of things, normal and expected revenues. On the wastewater fund side of things, again, property casualty insurance, debt service payments, and the lift station had its own pump that failed. And we had to replace that, and that was a little north of $10,000 as well. Both those are back in, they're functioning again. A little bit of follow-up, I think it was on the lift station one, but they'll be back to make sure that's taken care of. And then for the revenues, normal and expected so far. On the storm sewer fund end of things, we had some debt service payments, transfers to the debt service payments on that. Otherwise, revenues are coming in on target. On the electric fund end of things, property casualty insurance again. purchase some transformer pad mounts. In the budget, we have 20,000 allotted for transformer replacement program, so that was part of that. And then we did have some money that was paid out for the engineering on the substation project. In the 2019 budget, we had 500,000 out of reserves to do the substation project. We didn't know how quickly it was going to happen, but that's more looking like it'll happen next year rather than this year. So we won't see that $500,000 spent this year. We'll see a little bit for the engineering part of it, but the bulk will be the actual substation work that'll occur next year. And the electric fund revenues end of things, normal and expected. For the natural gas fund, just property casualty insurance was paid out of it, otherwise pretty normal expected, and normal expected out of the revenues. So we come to our cash investments and cash balances. We have the prior month there. Current, you can see it went up because we got our tax settlements and LGA payments. On the water fund, went up a little bit. Sewer went just hair down. Storm sewer hair down. Electric went a little bit up, and gas went a little bit up as well. And we've got most of the expenses out of the liquor fund, so if you want me to keep including it, I certainly can, but I just deleted that one out. And then we have the totals there from last month to current month. Any questions on the financial report? If not, that's all I have. Any other questions?
Street guy.
Basically working on our LED light replacement on the street lights. We'll be starting some more transformer replacement going on around town. Getting rid of some of the old ones and dilapidated ones, but mow lawn, spraying weeds, we've been sweeping streets. We got our grapple bucket for the payloader and the skid loader. They're both showed up here, so we have both of those now. We did about 10 gas installs in the last couple weeks here between Fairfax and Gibbon, so New Ulm came over and helped us get those done. And it got, I think Ground Zero will be coming to do within a week or two to do a bunch of street patching around town. So
All the ones that are
all the potholes, yeah, 90% of them that are all circled and marked out already. So. It was brought to my attention last Friday when the warning sirens went off. The two on the south end weren't working, so I had the siren company come to look for those, to check them out.
bring that up. It's pretty quiet at my house.
So they will be here hopefully this week yet. So other than that, and then we had to pump water last Monday. So we pumped water for about 12 hours. But we got everything's back to normal and under control. So. And I do have Minnesota Pump Works coming this week or next week to look at an alternative to for doing bypasses like this, so it'll be a little bit more user friendly and something maybe we can utilize the pumps that we have in the wall already instead of having to get a different pump to do a trailer around and try to pump with. So because most of our trash pumps aren't working, the little portable ones that we got, they're all kind of old and need some work. So other than that, I don't have much else. Nick covered the striping done, so everything else is going pretty good.
Okay, last month we had about 203 calls. It's a little higher than the month before. Denny had to do the toward zero death wave for the 4th of July, so that upped the traffic stops. Don't really have much on that. Fairfax Days of Thunder went pretty good. There was no issues with anything really. Just, I don't know, a couple people that drank a little too much, but we handled that. That's about it.
Okay, information packets available in their building permit list. Council concerns? Anybody? Well, let's do the fun stuff. Budget.
All right, time to have the real fun. If you thought the audit was exciting, Strap yourself in. Included in the packet, I handed out a 2020 budget process schedule. This is just to give you an idea of what we're looking at taking care of over the next 6 months as we hit for the December. So at the meeting this month, we'll go over the preliminary general fund numbers, preliminary electric and natural gas. August, we'll look at the same, except we'll add project list in for general fund. September, by law, by September 30th, we have to have our preliminary levy adopted and pass the preliminary budget. The real big part in that is that it's the levy that's the real important part. Adopting the budget really is meaningless. Because by statute, once we set our levy, we could always lower it, but we can't raise it. So we need to make sure that's set where we need it to be set in order to run operations. And as I'll go into the budget, again, this year I'm proposing we keep it flat as we have for the last 4 years as far as our levy goes. But we can always go down from that if we see a need to by December, but we can't raise it. Then after September, because that's the general fund, and that's why we have heavy focus in these coming months on the general fund, because we need to make sure that's in line to make sure our levy's in line for the preliminary. And then October, November, and December, it's less focused on general fund, more focused on utilities, because we need to get that preliminary levy out of the way that affects the general fund. And then 2, the later months, we have more data on the utility revenues and expenses that we've had year to date, which helps us really drive down and drill down on what those will look like for the next year. So October and November, you can see it's general fund and utility funds, heavier focused on utility funds and more on projects at that point. General fund should be pretty tweaked up by then. November final drafts, and then December we'll have our truth and taxation hearing that we have every year, and then we'll finalize general fund, utility funds, project lists, and then we would adopt the resolution for the final levy and adopting the final budget. That's what we're looking at for timeline. So then we'll shift over to the budget that was included in your packets, and we'll start going over that. Some notes before we get, some talking points before we get started on this. We have new people on the council, so I want to familiarize yourself on kind of how to read this. So first, I want to talk just generally about the budgeting philosophy I have. And when I put together the budget, with the numbers you're looking at, there are several ways to do a budget. As far as budget philosophy, I use what's called zero-based budgeting, which means I will wipe all the numbers to 0 for the 2020 budget, and then I will start rebuilding each one by hand. Other methods include just a straight percentage increase on the previous year. I don't like that because you're not taking into account fluctuations, and it's not a great steward of the taxpayer dollars. And there are some other ones, but I do zero-based budgeting. And generally speaking, with these preliminary budgets, as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll tweak them up, but my revenues I'll estimate on the lower side, and my expenses I'll estimate on the higher side. That leaves that good margin. I don't want to expect revenues to be higher and expenses lower, and then we run into a situation where it's the opposite, because then we end up short. But if we figure revenues lower when we're doing the budgeting process and expenditures higher, then even if we're off a little bit, we end up with a situation where the budget generally still sits fine in that regard. And then as we get closer to the end of the year, we can get that all tightened up with the additional data we have on revenues and expenditures. Then we want to talk about the structure of the budget worksheet. So if you're looking at the front page, the general fund revenues page of things, how you typically read this is you can see at the very top in the center, it's the proposed budget worksheet as of June 30th, 2019. That's the period that it's set for. Then in the upper left, you can see 7:05 of 19 to 10:05 a.m. That tells you when I ran the report for this and when I then printed it off. And then when you get down to the left-hand side of things, the underlined stuff is department level things. So that's the department that they're in for revenues, and you'll see them on the expenditure side as well. And then you'll see the numbers. There's 5-digit codes on the revenue side, and then you'll see a 5-digit code on the expenditure side, followed by a 3-digit code on that. And these are revenue and expenditure codes. Revenues for the city are in the 30,000 range. So all the revenues you'll see are going to be in 30,000. The 10,000s are, if you look at the city's chart of accounts and the balance sheet, the assets are listed under the 10,000 codes. The 20,000 codes are reserved for liabilities, equity and fund balances. 30,000s will be revenues, and 40,000s are expenditures. So you'll note that. And then in the columns there, you can see 16, 17, and 18 actuals at the top. And then you'll see 19 current budget, which is set for now year to date, what's been spent year to date. You can ignore projected year end. Our software program seems to think it's a great idea to try to project what expenses will be. It does a terrible job at doing it, so I would ignore those numbers completely. And then on the far right, you can see the requested budget for 2020. That's the column where we're setting our numbers for the upcoming budget. So that's the structure of the structure on that. And then for expenses on the expenditure side, there are a number of things I won't go into as heavy detailed about. I use namely wages, payroll taxes, para expenses, health insurances, things like that, workman's comp, property. I have spreadsheets that I use that populate that information across all of them, so I won't go into terribly large detail on those. But there are the other areas I'll touch a bit more on towards the end. So today we'll go over the general fund, the electric and the natural gas utility. Why electric and natural gas early on? Because they, as they said, they make transfers to the general fund, which supports the general fund operations. So to have an idea of how much we can transfer, we have to have those budgets somewhat in line. So with that, we'll start on page 1. Right at the front there, under revenues, you can see under, and I'll say the codes to help you with the line items. We're under taxes, 31010, the first one then, current ad valorem taxes. Ad valorem is another fancy phrase for property taxes. So in our current budget, we have set for 500,000, and this will vary. You can see the actuals. You always have people who don't pay their property taxes. So we levy 500,000, but we don't necessarily always get 500,000. But then the next line down, delinquent taxes, are taxes that you get from delinquencies, people paying up their taxes on that. So if we look at the current ad valorem taxes, we're keeping that the same. $500,000 was budgeted in 19. For the 2020 budget, I like to budget keeping taxes flat, no changes at this point. And then that helps us find out how much money we have left over for projects at the end of the day. Other than that, not a whole lot of changes. And we go down to local government aids. That's 33401, local government aid. In 2019, we'll be receiving $455,185. The new biennium's budget came out, which included in it an increase in funding for local government aid, which is the state's payment to cities. And there was an increase in that, so we're going to see about just shy of a $17,000 increase in that as part of there's a large formula that's used to figure out what each city gets. So we'll be seeing about a $17,000 increase in our LGA next year. That's been approved by the legislature. Then if we go down to 33420, insurance premium tax fire, you can read this as this is what used to be the contribution that came from the state of Minnesota to support firefighter activities. We have namely retirement. So this has we transitioned over in 2016, I believe it was, to para managed volunteer fire association. So what happens now, instead of the state giving us the money directly, the state gives para the money directly. So we no longer have to budget for this in our revenues. On the flip side, there is a line item under the fire department, which you would see this exact 25,761. It's a pass-through because it goes right into retirement. That has been reduced to zero as well. So both revenue expenditures have been reduced by that exact same amount, so it's a wash in the end. Then we go down to 33422, other state grants and aids. That is significantly decreased because the Small Cities Development Grant funding was being routed through there on the revenue side when we received those reimbursement payments, which were then paid out. 2020, we should no longer have that program running, should be wrapping up this year, so reduce that back down to, looked at the historicals, what we've seen over the past years, what is regularly in there, and reduce that to $5,000 in revenues. 33423, Rural Association shared expenses, reduced from 20,000 to 10,000. And what this is the Rural Association for fire, they pay the city half of our operating expenses on the fire side of things, and it was larger in previous years in 17 and 18 because there was equipment purchased, and they share in the cost of that. We're not going to see that. We don't have any equipment plans for purchases, so their share of the half of our expenses goes down equally in that, so we're reducing that down to what we believe it will be for next year as far as shared expenses. Then we'll skip down, we'll go down to General Miscellaneous Charges Department, 34,100, General Miscellaneous Receipts, reducing from 48,000 to 30,000, just looking at what we had in 2018, and what we had in that, reducing that down to what I think our revenues will be in that. Again, that philosophy of revenues lower, expenses higher. Community Center rent was the next one down, 34,101. Was increased from 2,500 to 4,000, just because we can see in previous years we had 5,700 in rental, almost 5,500 rental, and 4,700 last year in rental. So boosting that up to be more in line, but still under what we've seen in previous years, just to be safe. The other revenues, not a whole ton of changes to those. That's all I have for really notable things on the general fund revenue side of things. So then, any questions on revenue so far? All right, then we'll go to page 3, which starts our general fund operation, general fund expenses on things. A lot of the, like I said, the wages, the para, the FICA, health, Medicare, things like that, a lot of that's been pre-populated in that. If you have any questions about that, I certainly field them. Not a ton of notable things in here. We've made adjustments to some things. Under general, we have 4,100 or 41,000-600 payment to government agencies, and you'll see some of these things, and then below that you'll see permanent notes for that code, payments to government agency, how that's split out. Not everything has a permanent note attached to it, but things where I feel they break out so you see what's all comprised of. I've broken that out. So SWIFT, Southwest Initiative Foundation, we've traditionally paid a fee membership of $850 to that. The Arlington Cable Commission, which is the cable channel that we have on, it's been $1,000 that goes to that. And the Renville County Heartland Express, which is the bus service, it's been about $2,000 in that. We go down to council, so 41110-331, council meeting, or a meeting expense. There had been money budgeted that in the past. I've reduced that to 0. I just don't spend a whole lot of money on meeting expenses. Apologies, not getting food or any of that fun stuff for you. Things as far as trainings and things like that you'll go to, that'll go under the city administration line item 41,400,207. That's where that gets allotted out of there. Not a whole lot of changes in the city administration end of things. We go down with that. A lot of the wage stuff is in there. Office expense, reduce some of that there.
One question, Nick.
Yes.
Under city administration, there's 302 contract professional fees. There's some in 17, 18, and then we spent some in 19. We have nothing in there. I don't know what it includes, but it seems like we've had 3 years in a row of it, but I don't know what it's for.
I will check.
I mean, we've had 3 years of it. I would figure.
I will check into what those were exactly.
So maybe you shifted it to a different account, and now I'm going to shift it to.
What it could also be is a potentially weird one, like a
Well,
weird
we've had
one-time.
3 years. We've had it 3 years in a
Yep.
row, that's what I'm saying.
Yep, I see what you're saying there. I'll check into that and see what that was, and then I'll send out an email with the specifics on that. Otherwise, telephone stays the same, reducing office expenses by 2,000. Last year, we bought some filing cabinets, we bought some other stuff that was a one-time expense, so we shouldn't have those next year, so we can reduce that down. Under elections, you'll see that is, we put money back in for 2020, it'll be election cycle year, so we have the part-time employees on that, which will be the election judges we pay, and then election expense. The county handles a lot of it, but we have some maintenance fees that goes associated with the equipment that we use, that the county takes care of. It'll be part of that. So we flop over onto page 4. Auditing accounting services stays the same. Assessing services went up slightly from 7,205, would have been in 2018. Got the bill for it this year was 7,255, so it went up slightly, so I just put it at 7,300. Attorney's fees, the contract rate is 26,400 for civil and, I'm blanking on it. Criminal, thank you. But then I upped it to 27,000 for a $600 cushion, because that just covers the retainer. If there's any special work that needs to be done that's over and above it retainer, that would be an added cost, so just making sure we have a little buffer in there. Under general government buildings, cleaning supplies stayed the same. Utilities bumped up a little bit because we saw a little bit more historically. And a lot of these utilities, it's make your best guess. We don't know if we're going to get a really hot winter or a really hot summer or a really cold winter that will affect the utility bills in that. If I could predict what winter and summer was going to be as far as temperatures, I'd be a millionaire somewhere else with that kind of knowledge. So we do our best to do that in there. Figuring in on telephone, we've transitioned over to RS Fiber. We used to be with Mediacom and CenturyLink. We saved a bunch of money by transferring to RS Fiber and really consolidating the kind of services that we have. So I'm receiving better service. So adjusting all of that. And then we did have buildings went up a bit to cover the cost of the new contract. The contractor we have for cleaning was more than the previous one, so we're adjusting that to make sure those wages are covered. But he's an independent contractor, so I didn't put anything under full-time or part-time employees because he's technically not an employee on that. Moving over to page 5 on the public safety, on the police end of things. So baseline for health insurance, what I do is because I won't receive the information on what our rates will be for probably another month or so. So I automatically build in a 10% increase in our health insurance rates just to provide that buffer and estimation of things. So we'll get the actuals probably another month or so. Not a ton of changes on the police department end of things. Utilities up a little bit. Communications and radio up a little bit. That's just adjustments between fire and police and how the allotment of that went. Insurance has stayed about the same. Capital outlay was reduced to 0 because we haven't budgeted anything for that. And then for payment to government services, resource officer 42-100-600, you can see in the permanent notes. So we have the SRO program, which is between Fairfax, Gibbon, Winthrop, and the school district to supply security, school resource officer at the school. The school picks up the bulk of the cost of that. The Fairfax share of that is 8.75% of the total cost. Winthrop administers that program, so they handle all of that, and then they send us an invoice for what our 8.75% of the SRO costs are. You can see how historically that's fluctuated depending on the amounts. So we have it about $6,000 to make sure we're covered. This year was $5,512. We will get a little bit of a refund on that because between the time period when the SRO officer resigned and when they hired a new one, there's a bunch of time that was assumed that was going to be there, that we were billed for, because this is done earlier in the year. So there will be a refund coming on that later this year once they get that figured out. Under fire end of things, again, you can see 42-200, 124 fire pension contributions. You can see that 25,761 then goes to 0. Like I talked about on the revenue side, the fire para pass-through. Adjusting on office expense down a little bit, minor equipment purchases, training's about the same, utilities down a little bit. And then probably the other one is on page 6, right at the top, 42,200, 404, maintenance and repairs. We've been seeing higher maintenance and repairs costs versus what we've had budgeted, so bump that up to 15,000 to make sure we have that covered. And then under capital outlay for the fire department, there's typically some things that carry over year to year to year. That is budgeted for $2,000 for pagers, $1,000 a year for turnout gear, and then it was $5,000 for miscellaneous equipment, but I turned that down to $2,500 for miscellaneous equipment. Had to make, and there are other areas where we cut that from $5,000 down too, just because our debt service payments are higher this year than they have been in previous years, and we do have the RS fiber payment that we're mandated to pay as well, so we just got to make sure we're getting that tightened up. Under ambulance, office expenses up a bit on that. Just historically, we've seen a little bit more spent on that. Medical supplies, BLS, 201, that's down because we didn't see that. 17 was kind of a little bit of an expensive year, but previous year, this year, 18 was a little bit less. 19 is looking to be a good year for that too. Ambulance intercepts, a little bit up on that, just based on previous. Continuing ed. And then capital outlay on that 500, 42,353, 500 under capital outlay. You can see that under the permanent notes at the bottom there. The annual ambulance allocation of 12,500. So each year, we bought a new ambulance recently. It was $212,000. In order to help defray that cost into the future, we allocate an amount of money annually that then gets placed into the city's general fund reserves, so that and it's every 10 years a bus is purchased. We use them for 20 years. We have 2 of them, which means we rotate that. So every 10 years a new bus is purchased. So every 10 years we build up money to help pay for approximately half the cost. And then that's less you'd have to budget in 1 year to help take care of an ambulance, to help write down that cost. Same with the cot allocation. Cots are 40 grand to get a cot these days. So you put a little away every year so that when the time comes you need to get one, you've got money set aside so you don't, the general fund project isn't completely eaten by one item. Under building inspections, reduced from 10,000 to 7,000. This would be the amount we pay to Bernie Wenner for building fees. We had one up in 17, but then other years it's been lower on that, so reduce that to match closer to that. Under civil defense, that doesn't have anything budgeted into it. The only thing that would potentially come out of there would be the siren check each year, but that's allocated under streets, highway, streets, and roads, rather than throwing the one little thing into civil defense budget. Civil defense was more popular back in the 60s. Those budgets were more, we'd stockpile food and rations and things because communist scare and all that stuff. Doesn't really get used quite as much these days. Under highway, streets, and roads, shop materials about the same. Increase gas in the streets fuel consumption, so 43,100-212 gas streets. That's up a little bit just based upon our fuel consumption historically. And that street maintenance has been zeroed out. That cost gets rolled into streets capital outlay is where that money gets rolled into now. So just zero that out, roll it into a different line item. Training's about the same, utilities about the same, a lot of stuff's still the same. Maintenance repairs down a little bit because we just haven't seen that usage. And then there's streets capital outlay, so 43,100-500. You can see in the permanent notes down below. We have 55,000 allocated to do seal coating, crack filling, and patching for next year. That's traditionally how much we've had to work with. We do approximately 10 blocks of seal coating each year is what we target for, and then what we have left over use for crack filling those areas, and then other areas of the city where street patching needs to occur. Under that, we also have $1,000 for street sign replacement, $2,500 for miscellaneous tools, and then $5,000 for tree maintenance. So that tree maintenance is cutting down boulevard trees or limbing them or whatever we need to do to, because those boulevard trees are in the city's right of way, city's responsibility for them, so we budget money to help take care of them. And then just below, nothing in capital labor. And we have street equipment capital outlay 507, street banners. This will be the project we're currently working on. I've got the design. I'll present that at next month's council meeting. I have the design for the 2019 banners, which was submitted from the school. So every year we'll do a fourth of the banners with a unique banner that is designed by the school district. So each year a fourth will be replaced. That's about $1,500 it'll take to replace the banners each year to do that project. And then under 603 is a street sweeper, because we lease our street sweeper. We do not outright own it. So we have that principal and interest that we pay on that. Nothing under sidewalks and maintenance. At the bottom there, over to page 9, ice and snow removal. Again, this is one where if you knew what winter was going to do, I'd love to know. So I haven't changed the budget all too much on that. Increased maintenance repairs by $1,000 on that. Otherwise, it stayed the same. 16 and 17, you can see that for contract labor and fuels, it was pretty low. But 18 and 19 had pretty heavy snowfalls, so they were higher than budgeted. So over time, you hope that kind of evens out in the end. Make adjustments as needed. For street lighting, utilities, that has been decreased from $8,000 to $7,000, and you can see over the history there, the cost has gone down. This is the result of changing out all of our street lights to LEDs from the former ones. We're now saving money on electricity on that, and street light maintenance, you can expect to probably see that go down quite a bit too, because they won't need nearly as maintenance. And then no street capital outlay, because this year we'll be done with all the changeouts. Under waste refuse collection, waste refuse collection and waste refuse disposal all deal with solid waste, the garbage that we have. So this will be John Clovis's fees, and then for collection, and then recycling costs, that is the citywide cleanup in there. A little bit of other things. And then waste refuse disposal, this is for Redwood Solid Waste Authority, the cost for tipping fees for depositing the trash. Under weed and pest control, this is where we pay Clark Mosquito out of to take care of the bugs. Then we go on to page 10. Right at the top there, participant recreation, summer rec. The school administers the summer rec program, and each year our share of those costs is $7,000 that we then remit to the school district for putting on the summer rec program. It's been $7,000 for quite some time. So that's our contribution towards that. At the pool, not a whole lot of changes at the pool from this year to next year. A few minor adjustments, but then also for the capital outlay, 500 code at the bottom. It used to be $5,000 for miscellaneous pool equipment. That's been reduced to $2,500 for miscellaneous pool equipment for capital outlay. In some previous years, so capital outlay will include, if anything gets budgeted to do anything with the pool, it'd be the $2,500 plus whatever we budget. So that would explain previous years in that. Under the parks, not too many terrible changes in here, other than the capital outlay 500 code. It goes from 130,000 down to 5,000 because this year was the big parks projects, and we haven't allocated any money for parks projects. But under the 500 code capital outlay under permanent notes, it actually shifts up to the top of page 11 for the capital outlay notes. We put away $5,000 a year, and then I think it's every 3 years, then we replace a mower. Mowers run in that $15,000 range for commercial park mowers. So each year we just allocate $5,000 and then buy one outright. Under baseball park, this department is specific for the ball field, the Memorial Park ball field, and its expenses. So we have baseball park maintenance. This is Shavy's work that he does out there that we pay him for. Parks, grounds, and maintenance. That's for upkeep of the ball field, utilities out there as well. And then we reduced the capital outlay on that from 120,000 to 0 because we'll be taking care of the projects this year. Under library, nothing too terribly earth-shattering there. The one to note is line items dash 600, 45, 500 dash 600, payment to government agency. And what we do is what a lot of cities do with public libraries is we own the building, we take care of the building, but the operations are taken care of by a library system. In our case, it's Pioneer Land Library System. So they bill us, they give us, let's call it a maintenance of effort that is set by the state of Minnesota that we have to remit to them for operations of the library. I haven't gotten that new number yet, which is why you haven't seen it change. I should receive that yet this fall. We can get that adjusted at that time. Shade tree, nothing budgeted there. And that brings us to the total expenditures that we have. And the next section it's supplemental sections for other financing sources, so other revenues, and then other financing uses, which is other expenditures. And in these we have, the big one here that you'll see is 39202 on page 12, contributions from enterprise funds. This is the transfers from electric and natural gas. So I've maxed out that's why we look at the electric and natural gas funds next. I've maxed those out for transfers to the general fund because we have those higher debt service payments, because we have the RS fiber payments that are coming out. I want to make sure the general fund still operates well. So that's been increased to 475,000, electric 275,000, and natural gas 200,000 in that. And then under other financing and uses, the major one we use out of this is the 49,300-725, which is a transfer to debt service. So that's our debt service payments that comes out of the general fund. So you can see under that the permanent notes there for the 2012A, what that represents is the 2012A series bond, and those are denoted by the year they were issued, and then there's A, B, C. If there are multiple issues in one year, then you'll get A, B, C, D. Usually, if it's always the first one, it's a 2000A is what that is. So the 2012 A1 was the infrastructure project on the south side of town, the major one, and that's the debt service out of the general fund associated with that. And then the 2015, the 18, and then the IRS fiber required payment in that for a total of $351,373 of debt service on that. So after all that, we get to the very bottom, the bottom right, revenues and other sources. Over under expenditures, you can see that the number there is $211,233. That represents at this point with the 2020 budget as is without any further additional tweaks, that's how much money is left over to do projects in the general fund. So that's the figure we'll work with. Is that with every project season there will always be more projects that need to be done than we have funding for, but that's where we go through this process of getting the list of all projects together, the dream list, and we prioritize what needs to be done, and then we figure out what's going to fit within that budget. Any questions on the general fund so far? I'll try to wrap this up and get us out of here. I only have two more departments. Granted, the electric, so yeah, general fund comprises a lot of departments. Electric just deals with electric, natural gas just deals with natural gas. So on the electric fund side of things, 604, to note on here for revenues, the one thing to note, 37,440 refunds. We have previously had 0, you'll now see 30,000 in there. What this is based on the conversations with Compass and the attachment O we're looking at receiving. They estimated between 30 and 60,000 on the attachment O that Fairfax could be looking at getting. So I went with the lowest number on that revenue. As Compass works more on it with us this year, we should be able to dial that in a whole lot better, and we can adjust that number at a later date. So I just went with the absolute lowest on their estimate on that. If it turns out it's more, hey, great, that's more revenue. But again, I'd rather be on the low side and then find out we get more than to budget high and we have to cut back. On the next page, on the expenditures side of things, one thing to note under power production, 49,550, 261, about halfway down, CMMPA power purchased. That's the power we purchased from Compass. I was at $312,000, it's down to $225,000. And the reduction in that is, we'll receive confirmation of it from the Compass board, I would say in the near future. Because Compass is doing so well with their own attachment O revenues that they're generating from this, they used to charge a member fee based on kilowatt hours to each of the member cities. Because they're doing so well with this attachment O stuff, they are looking at eliminating those fees altogether because they're no longer needed. For the city of Fairfax, that was about 72,000, or I'm sorry, 76, 77, I want to say.
I think that's what it was.
But they haven't quite finalized that yet, but I would assume that'll get finalized here in the near future, so that takes that into account. We go over to page 3 on the electric fund. On the distribution end of things, not a ton of changes. You'll see a change in 49,570-215 shop materials. Just haven't used that many of them, so we're reducing in that. However, equipment parts and repairs, that has been increased to 9,000 to be with what has historically we've been seeing in that. We will also be reducing continuing education training program 308 from 9,000 down to 5,000. You can see in the 18 and 19 it's been up, and that is Chad Cloggis' training for his electric certification. He should finish that this year in 2019, so we'll have his full certification so we can reduce our costs associated with that going into 2020. On the administration, just so we've got skip transmission, we go down to administration in general. Not too many changes in that we see, except for taxes, permit assessments, and dues. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what used to be put in there. But I shifted it to someplace else, so there hasn't been much in there now. So that has been reduced down because we see in 18 it was at 4,400, or about 2,000 now, so I set it to 5,000. Right off the top, I remember looking at that account, the money had shifted elsewhere, I just can't remember specifically where that was. I apologize. So that's it for administration in general. So we flip the page to page 4. Under other financing sources, under 39203, transfer from reserves. So transfers from reserves is just saying, that just says we'll use reserves to fund part of the electric. And you can see in 2019 we had 500,000, that was for the substation project. Since the bulk of that's going to happen next year, budget 500,000 again from reserves to pay for that. That was always the intent, is to use reserves to pay for that. We go down to capital outlay distribution. You can see there, and then we have under 500, the capital outlay of $534,000 this year. That's reduced down to 520,000. Again, that's where the 500 then is offset by the substation rehab project, and then the $20,000 in that for the transformer replacement program we're implementing to make sure we keep our transformer system up to date. And then under transfers out, on the bottom there, 49990,720. You can see that $275,000 that gets transferred to the general fund. So that is the start of the electric fund. Any questions on that so far? All right, we'll move on to the last one, natural gas. Natural gas on that, revenues match what has historically been seen on that, not too many changes there. So we can flip over to the expenditures side of things. Nothing too terribly noteworthy on here so far. We make adjustments. So on this one, this is where we have 45,570, 262, and 264. Natural gas purchase 262 is the amount of natural gas that we purchase for the city of Fairfax. And then 264 transportation capacity charge, you can read that just to be Heartland. That's the amount that Heartland does, since we get two separate invoices for what the city uses and the city of Fairfax and Gibbon, and then what Heartland uses, and budgeting appropriately for those. Other than that, not too much on there for natural gas. Flipping over to page 3, the final page, we do have under capital outlay 500, natural gas service installations for 5,000, and equipment replacement for 3,000, and we budget annually. And then we have bond principal, and then transfers, the very last one. There's the 200,000 that will get transferred to the general fund. Oh, I skipped, so I apologize. If we go, real quick note, we go back to electric fund. Sorry, page 4 of the electric fund. Again, on the bottom of that, revenues and other sources over expenditures, you can see even with all the transfers and what have you, the electric fund is still looking to make $27,500 on that. So we'll continue to tighten that up, and if you want to transfer more, less into the general fund, we can look at it at that time. Again, with the last page on the natural gas fund in the bottom right, general fund is looking at, natural gas fund is looking at having a little over $15,000 in revenues over expenses, all said and done. So that's what I have for the first look. I'm only about 45 minutes. Enthralling material, I'm sure. Any questions on any of that? So really, this is the first hard look. Future budget workshops will not be quite this line item detailed, since we've kind of gone through the meat and potatoes. I'll make notes of tweaks that I make to this existing one, and I'll just fill you in on the tweaks of those. Not necessarily go through the entire thing once again, then we'll start hitting the project list.
Just one comment or so.
Yep.
I'd like to see the expense side raised up on snow removal. I mean, not to go to the extent that we've got this last year, but I just think it's, the last couple of years have been pretty hectic, and I think going back to a 3-year average is gonna be too low. I don't know if you wanna raise it another $3,000-4,000. And then I saw on the park side, code number 45-200-225. It says parks and ground maintenance there. It's mostly been upper $11,000, even $11,216. We're down to 10. You might as well make that another 15. Instead of 10,000, make that 11,500. Not that big a difference, but you can see that 10 has been lower than it's been the last 3 years. And it's not, expenses aren't going to be lower.
Yep.
Them are the only two. The other thing I would try, when you look at the electrical and gas fund, remember here in the near future when all of our employees are gas licensed, electrical licensed, with maybe a journeyman, you take all the other qualifications they have, where their pay is now, and what they could be making in Redwood, Hutch, Walm, Springfield, Sleepy Eye. At some point, they're gonna sit down there and say, hey, I got all these licenses, and these cities pay me here, and I'm here. You're gonna have to either make some adjustments or start retraining again. I'm just telling you, that'll come up in the near future, so the budgets on those might have to be looked at a little differently than they are just by raising that 3 to 4%.
And hopefully with the conclusion of the classification and compensation study, that'll provide us with a good well.
Yeah, but I'm just saying on the budgeting side, now
Yep.
you gotta start looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just a warning on that. All right, I got nothing else. Now I need a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion. Second.
Been moved second adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion has been carried.